CSGO, or CSGO, you know, if you hate yourself, is a game I've held dearly in my heart for years. With around 1,000 hours logged on this now classic FPS, I very clearly have enjoyed a decent amount of my formative years jump scouting and ninja defusing. With over 500,000 concurrent players and topping the Steam charts at the time of making this video, you know, competing with Dota 2 and the typical top competitors, Valve's loot box simulator hasn't lost much momentum since its release in 2012. With that being said, I haven't played much of it at all for around a year or so, with most of my interest in the competitive FPS genre shifting over to Rainbow Six Siege, a much smaller title player base wise. Although I don't know the exact reason I lost the interest in CSGO, I can break down a number of possibilities why, and what exactly could be changed in order to reel me back in. These potential changes could also mean life or death for the game in the coming years, with an inevitable new Fortnite-sized giant showing up sooner or later, with the gaming industry growing larger each and every day. So without further ado, let's hop into my thoughts on CSGO and the potential it has for even greater success. New content these days in gaming is a must if you want to keep your multiplayer title semi-relevant. Take Fortnite for example. Love it or hate it, Fortnite has a patch every single week, changing the game in some sort of way to keep things fresh. One of my favorite features that used to take place in CSGO were the operations. Operations were, in a way, cheap DLCs that brought fun campaigns that you can complete with friends, new game modes, maps, badges, collectibles, and what have you. The first of its kind, Operation Payback, debuted in April of 2013 with 7 more to follow, basically releasing 2 every year or so. The last operation, Hydra, was released on May 23rd, 2017, over 3 years ago. Valve axed the entire operation system and simply stopped making them without acknowledgement of any kind. Their focus most likely shifted into Danger Zone, which we will get into in a bit, but this disappearance of one of my favorite DLC schedules definitely took a toll on my hope for more content in Counter-Strike. There's a very clear lack of new content in CSGO, which brings up another interesting point. Is that why it's so successful? Many games nowadays find themselves driving away players due to them changing such beloved mechanics. H1Z1 was the granddaddy of battle royales, and now you won't find a soul on the servers. I'm a murderer! This was due to the huge changes made to the combat and movement system that many players found themselves coming back to. It all relates to developers overpatching or trying to overfix things. Is Valve simply afraid of history repeating itself for them? Is that why they aren't very willing to make huge gameplay changes? That still doesn't speak for why new content not negatively affecting gameplay such as operation maps isn't added though. This simply gives them the excuse not to make any drastic balancing changes to weapons or how players move. With that being said, let's talk about the Danger Zone effect. Danger Zone, if you aren't familiar, is the quote battle royale that CSGO added to the game back in early December of 2018. I say quote battle royale only because it does not play much like other BRs that are commonly known, with only 18 players in the game at once and most weapons being purchased and delivered via drone. The update that brought Danger Zone to the game and also made CSGO free to play raked in a decent amount of new players and appeared to have stopped what was recently observed as a static decline in player count. Today, the average number of players online is a clean 100,000 greater than what it was last year. This increase definitely has a lot to do with the addition of the BR and free-to-play implementation. As I said before, Danger Zone is most likely the reason we haven't seen operations in a number of years, since there's a small team of 5 working at the indie developer studio known as Valve, and they can only focus on so many projects at once. But this comes to my problem with Valve and CSGO. With such a massive diehard fan base, why is new fresh content not added to the game constantly? Valve clearly doesn't have a ton going on, save for subtly updating Dota 2. This brings us to the pandemic in CS. Cases. It's kind of a meme at this point, the obsession with cases. I mean, hey man, I've been there at 4 in the morning in the dark at my PC depositing 20 bucks into my PayPal in hopes of opening up a digital knife. I think we've all been there, or maybe just me. It was exciting, but it gets to a point where that just isn't enough anymore, and it just looks like a sad excuse to say you're adding things into your game, and that's exactly what's happening. Instead of creating a new game mode or constantly refreshing the game, Valve just says, hey, let's have the community make a couple skins for us and then turn around and resell them for a drop chance. Or, you know, just subtly remake old maps and re-release them and make a big deal out of it. I'm totally fine with having a microtransaction system in a game, don't get me wrong, but whenever that's your main addition of content, you should review what you're doing and your priorities of how your games run. So if Rainbow Six Siege tends to fill in the gaps that CSGO misses its marks on, why does it not overtake the player base? There are several factors that lead into this. Rainbow Six at its core has a much higher learning curve for new players. It's frustrating for new players to constantly get spawn peeked and learn just how you are to move when attacking and defending. In addition, CS's recent swap to free-to-play is of course going to attract many more players not wanting to drop $20 on the base game, depending on which version of Siege you pick up. And sure, Rainbow Six has operations, but none to the extent that CS went with theirs. In a typical R6 operation, 2 new operators or playable characters are released, a map is added or reworked, a small mid-season event takes place, and then the balancing changes are made to operators and playlists. Sure, this is a decent amount of content, but none to the extent that would last weeks upon weeks of fresh gameplay like Counter-Strike operations would bring. The addition of a mission book that you slowly worked your way through with friends competing in new campaign missions and multiplayer objectives brought a real feeling of a DLC season to the title. Now we have Danger Zone, which although has already received a new map, doesn't bring the feeling I missed that operations once did. There's only so much replayability there. Fortnite is a different story. The competitive scene is hotly debated due to the fact that the game receives literal weekly content updates. This changes the state of balancing so often that typically things are thrown out of balance just days before massive tournaments for large prizes of cash. However, the reason that this is done is to keep the majority player base of casuals interested, as the game can change at any second. If CSGO could find something of a healthy balance between this and what they do now, which is basically never adding anything to the game to keep both parties entertained, I really think they could find some untapped potential. The CSGO pro scene is no doubt one of the driving factors that keeps it in the limelight today. In fact, for more competitive shooters and games in general, the ever-growing esports scene we see becoming more and more prevalent will continue to keep games on their feet for longer periods of time. Some of the most memorable esports moments for me in particular come from Counter-Strike Pro matches. If you remember when Cloud9 was the first NA team to win a major, that moment was huge and it was super exciting. I remember less than a year ago when I went to my first ever esports event in person, CWL or Call of Duty World League in Fort Worth. If you've never been to an event of this size for gaming, it's hard to relate to, but let me just tell you there's a different energy at pro venues. The crowds, the players, and the vibes are just all around really powerful. After I went to CWL, I knew for certain esports was here to stay. Everyone just has to give it a chance and really experience it at least once to understand the hype. One of my stream moderators, admin, and close friends Poison had a little bit of input that I wanted from him. He's a very passionate CSGO fan like myself, and I thought his perspective on the state of the game would be a nice different point of view so that you don't just hear my thoughts on everything. When I reached out to him about the topic of the video and just what I was wanting to touch on, here's what he had to say. CS has seen its peak but still maintains a competitive amount of players. CS was always the best shooter in my eyes but has stagnated with the lack of content and community support behind it. We've also lost a large amount of updates that we would still be seeing if CS had kept the momentum going. Overall, you could say it was greed, lack of content in YouTube or Twitch, or lack of the company really putting effort into their game. I think it speaks to how good CS was and still is with 500,000 players concurrent this month. That's rare for a game that's been out so long with content coming very slowly. I think it's time for a new game and Valve failed to deliver, and that's how we ended up here. Even a more modern graphic rich CS would have done wonders for the game and future releases. It's a shame to see a game you love just slowly die from lack of care and content from the developers. Is there something coming in the future for CS? Probably. Is it a priority for Valve? Absolutely not. Once again, thank you Poison for the input, and I definitely agree with pretty much everything he had to say. I'm gonna leave his link to his Twitter down in the description below. While the title has in fact seen its peak, the potential for it to increase its reach in the gaming community is so obvious that it's frustrating to see the path Valve has let it go down. Now I must add that while Valve does update the game, it isn't often whatsoever, and the amount of content within said updates is not much to cover at all. Take for example the last major update published on July 31st. Not too long ago, right? While these updates do occur, as I stated before, not much is included within them to drag new and existing players back. Wednesday's update brought in minimal changes such as playlist changes, small QoL map adjustments, UI changes, and bug fixes. I'm not in the least bit complaining about a helpful update such as this one, but every quote patch to this game is like this. No fresh, exciting game modes or operations, no party games with friends, nothing very noteworthy in general, if you get what I mean. As I said from the beginning, I hold a very special place in my heart for Counter-Strike Global Offensive. I want nothing but to see it remain as a competitive FPS giant. That's why I wish certain changes would be made and more content would be added in order to bring it to its full potential. Enough with the cases being used as an excuse for updates. Bring real challenges to the game that encourages players to compete with their friends in different missions and work together to collect all the campaign stars available. Even fun, just for laughs game modes would really tie the community together. I mean, just look at Fortnite. With the recently passed World Cup, they didn't only have a competition for the solos and duos tournament. They had an entire separate prize pool just for creative challenges, which ranged from prop hunt minigames to parkour courses. They found the expansion that some people can find interest in, apart from the usual no-nonsense battle royale tournaments. I want only for well-designed shooters such as CSGO to reach their full potential, which is why I felt so passionate about this topic that I felt a video was warranted. I really want to know your thoughts on this discussion down in the comments below as well, as I think a lot of people would agree with me in this case. I'd also like to hear what you think of essay style videos such as this one, so just write whatever comes to your mind on your thoughts on that. And with that that being said, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace.